Welcome to The Secret Witch Show, the podcast providing a safe and alchemical altar space of conversations which help powerful women escape a half-hearted, spiritless society and rediscover the freedom of living a wildly magical life. Every other week, we explore how to cast aside the wounds of shame, guilt, and fear connected with fully being yourself, so you can grant yourself permission to stop hiding, ground soulfully back into your body, illuminate your whole soul desires, tend your soul, rediscover and reclaim your powerful gifts, express your magic, and manifest your wildest alchemy. There's no better place to become who your heart longs to be. This is where we will guide you into liberation. I'm your host, Nicole Barton, and I'm so excited to dive in. Welcome, magical ones, to the show. And what's really alive for me at the moment to share with you is just the beautiful, deep connection that is happening in our Facebook community, in our Secret Witch Circle Sisterhood. This is a space for all those women who are deeply, deeply magical, but also feeling isolated as if they just haven't got anybody who understands them. So if that is you, we are creating this beautiful community of connection, this beautiful gathering of sisters where we also hold space each month at new moon for a beautiful live ritual hosted by me. And yeah, it's just the most magical space for those beautiful, sensitive, dreamy, phosphoric witches who just don't know their own magic, don't allow their own magic, don't allow themselves to be their beautifully sensitive magical gifts. So if that is you, please do join us over on Facebook in our Secret Witch Circle, and we will be delighted to have you with us. For today, though, on the Secret Witch Show, our guest is Elizabeth Lovius. Elizabeth is a changemaker and leadership mentor who teaches how to live and lead from soft power. She offers people the headspace to have fresh insight, let wisdom lead, and cultivate a culture for humans, all of which helps leaders navigate and lead real change. She's an international speaker, author, award-winning trainer, and social entrepreneur. And for over 25 years, she's worked across most business sectors and discovered that what really works in any business is the capacity of the leaders to understand the human factor, what makes us all tick. She develops leaders grounded in clarity, collaboration, creativity, and confidence. In this episode, Elizabeth and I explore what we mean by soft power and its difference to hard power. We begin to get a feel for the feminine energetic of soft power with heart-led leadership and understand why the feminine has to lead and the importance of divine union or equality, and begin to understand the practical embodiment of this energetic for women who want to become magical leaders by becoming their remedy in the world. Let's dive in. Welcome, Elizabeth. I am really so delighted to have you on the show because we come from the same lineage as well in many ways. We both work deeply with the same magical soul guide in our embodiment of the feminine. And as if that's not like enough that we share, we also share a love of homeopathy, which is the true lineage of the wild apothecary path that we guide women into here at Team Secret Witch. So it's kind of magically perfect that as we're leading women there, that you're a guest now. So I know that your own principles are also close to my heart. So I can't wait to dive in, and welcome.
Thank you very much, Nicole.
It's my pleasure. So what I would love to begin with, I would love to just know a little bit more. I always think it's a nice place to start, to kind of dive into your journey. I know, our episode here is about how to lead from soft power. So I'd love to hear a little bit about what soft power is and your journey to it. Feels like a good place to start.
Okay, well, what comes to mind immediately is a story that I must tell you. Ooh. Because this is the best way we can get into this subject. So you won't know from my voice probably, but I am 59 years old, which means that I was really, my work life began in the 80s. So I think we all know what the 80s looked like. Big hair, big shoulder pads, big belts. Everything was big and, you know, strong looking. You know, that was the era of Jane Fonda and her exercise. Dominate your body, dominate it, right? So I worked in IBM in the 80s. And that was the epitome of, I would say, that, you know, they wore blue suits. There was a kind of look that you had, and it was the 80s. So it was, like I said, shoulder pads and big things. And so I was always interested in looking good. And so I was archetypally 80s. And it was at this time that I came across this, some of you may know about this kind of colors, color me beautiful, this idea of spring, summer, autumn, winter palettes, choosing an archetype and colors that suited you and your skin tone. But it was also an energetic as well. And I was convinced that I would be dramatic and kind of Grace Jones end of the spectrum. And I was looking like that as well, you know, with my black and my orange and my big earrings and all the things. And I would stride around being, you know, an 80s child IBM person. And then I went along to this woman, this magical woman called Carolyn Miller. And she was ostensibly a color beautiful practitioner, but she was absolutely a not very secret witch. And so once she got you in her clutches, I have to say clutches now, once she got you in her clutches, she saw inside your soul and some transformation happened. And all she was doing was sort of saying, you're this archetype and wear these colors, but not really. Mm-hmm. I was convinced I would be told I was going to be this winter dramatic, which is very masculine, energetic, and very hardcore. And I was getting it right. And she told me this. She said, there's a sergeant major in you, and she has locked the maiden in the cellar, and you need to let her out.
Wow.
Now I can still feel tingles now, like 40 years later, 30 years later. And she was telling me I needed to wear floating. I was a romantic, the opposite end of the spectrum. I had to wear pink, which I thought was the most ridiculous thing in the world. I had to wear little, delicate, small scale things, not big, chunky, huge things. It was literally the opposite. And I cried and I cried and I cried the whole way through that session, because you can't unhear it when you hear the truth. But it was I had to take off a mask that I had applied to myself. But I tell you what that gave me. It opened the door. I was actually what is known as a natural romantic. So that has got quite a lot of like floaty, but also kind of practical, roll your sleeves up, you know, not neat and tidy, you know, floating and flowy and curly hair and all things. And that experience at that age, I think I was 29, at that age, opened a door to another way of being that was equal as the others. So it wasn't better to be a dramatic yang, Grace Jones type. It wasn't better to be an Elizabeth Taylor, glamorous, fulsome, buxom type. It was just a different energetic. And that we all kind of have that. So it was my first real foray into the idea of yin and yang, and the opening of the door to the feminine, or what I would now call soft power. And it changed me. And of course, dressing differently does have some impact on you, but it was embodying and allowing myself to embody the natural romantic energetic that had me start to value what the feminine. And I, from that point on, accepted, embraced that externally, but I still had some way to go internally. So it opened the door. But, you know, we're brought up in a world where achieving things achieving the goal is the most important thing. And there is such beauty in achieving goals, you know, but there's power in it. It can be really satisfying. So I'm not anti-achieving goals, but I noticed that I would achieve goals and they wouldn't necessarily satisfy something deep inside me. So I got interested in, well, what does? And that took me very much into what I'll call a spiritual journey of who we are really. And what, you know, I suppose what am I meant to do? What is my unique contribution in the world? And I found myself if you're interested, you can see on my website, but I found myself always gravitating to work that involved facilitating people, coaching, facilitation, teaching towards a goal. So the goal was part of the story, but how are we going to work together to achieve the goal became my trade. Or how are you, if I'm working with an individual, what's your goal, but how are you going to get there? And I found myself naturally moving away from strategy, which is, I think, a head orientation, right to what is it that stops you? And that's an inside job. That's a heart orientation. That's not because you don't know the strategy. You know the strategy. You're just not doing the strategy. So what else? Not that you don't know what to do. You're just not doing it. And that takes an inquiry somewhere deeper. And so for me, this lives in the unknown, or in the formless, or in the subconscious, or in what I would now consider to be the feminine, the shadow. If there's light and shade, it's that which is submerged. It's under the earth. You know, I often think the masculine is New York City. Everything's up and pointing up, big thrusting things pointing up, right? That's New York City. And then the earth is like the feminine. It holds it. It's nobody's paying attention to the earth, but it holds the thing that's thrusting. So those things that hold are not visible and they don't do anything. Soil is passive, right? And yet everything is birthed in it. It's the birthing place. So I kind of got interested in that aspect of facilitating and helping people achieve things. And then I started to see that there was another nuance that was needed. So there's the invisible, you could say, or the stuff that isn't immediately obvious is the earth that we grow inside of. And the obvious thing is these pointing things up, these goals that we achieve, right? But then I started to see something about the difference between goals for their own sake, which is, we can make it go faster. Let's do that. I don't know. Let's put a rocket on Mars or whatever. But then there were goals that were serving the whole.
Ooh, yeah.
And that is a whole different thing. See, when the goal is of service to the whole, everyone wins. And then I started to see something about the power. I used to call it visioning. I would get every group to co-create a shared vision and then look at what goals they needed to make that happen, instead of starting with what's your goal. And then what would that mean? So I started to bring in naturally to my own work, because I work with leaders, basically. I started to start with visions, and it was the bit they loved the best because it elevated them and it brought them into their desire. And that is soft power.
Wow. So much in that I'm kind of like, oh, where do I start?
Okay, so that's my
And
opening line.
yeah. It's a magical story. And I think, did you just drink from a cup that said Queen as well? I love
Yes,
that.
I actually chose this
Awesome.
cup for you.
Amazing. I love that. Perfect. Well, what it firstly, I just really resonated, and I didn't know that story about you actually with the like the energetic dressing that you did, and that is actually one of the ways that I really do like embody the energetic of my witch queen. He's called Alchemilla, by the way, so she has her own personality. But there's just such a power in that, what you call archetypal dressing, but what I also see is possible as we work with kind of like the remedy personalities in the wild as well, and essentially they're all kind of archetypal things, but there's just such a power in that. And I love how even before you kind of got to this point in where you are with your work, like even all the way back, it kind of is still there in yeah, wanting for us to see it. I guess it's like that wisdom that you talk about is always still there. So I loved that to start with. um and yeah, I don't know if you've got anything to add on that before I move on, just in case.
Well, I just want to say this one thing, that my whole journey has led me to see what I'm here to do is really wake people up in the corporate, in the business setting, to the value of soft power. And everyone has access to it, but women especially lead from it. And so I feel like this earth, valuing the earth, is obviously a metaphor in what I've been talking about, but it's obviously wider and more meaningful now. I don't know if you've noticed how important the earth is to us all. So goals that serve the whole, goals that honor the earth in business is very relevant to what I do.
Yeah. Yeah, I really feel that. There's something, actually, maybe that's a good place to go to next, because it feels like there's what you're talking to there is like often we can have these kind of, I want to call them materialistic goals, but that kind of sounds like a criticism of them, because again, there's nothing wrong with having goals that manifest abundance and things that we desire. That's like kind of the whole point, right? But there's like a deeper place that you're speaking to here, it feels, about where these goals are coming from. And I think maybe that would be a good place to explore. There's something tied into, I think actually just before we were talking, maybe it'd be good to go there. Just before we began recording, there was something you said about the Queen, which I think could be good to bring in here, because it ties into that desire of being in service to desire. So I don't know whether that feels aligned to go into here.
Yeah. So in my kind of mission to honor soft power and to explore what it means and how it works, and really it means to me being led by heart and soul, which is the less visible elements of us. You have to distinguish the opposite, which is what I'm calling head or hard power. And that is hard in the sense that it's visible in the world of form, very visible, and head power in the sense that it's analytical and it's structured and logical and rational. And so you've got a sense of something created in form rationally. And that's the yang, masculine, energetic. And we can often kind of feel like we have to diss the other. It has to be we live in a world, it's been dominated by the masculine energetic, so we now need to kind of not do that, and that's bad and wrong, and we now need to do this other thing that's much more about women and feminine. And that's really, I want to say, that is not where I'm coming from.
I think that's really important to just point out, actually, is that often the secret witch will really have this sense of deep resistance to the masculine. Often my women will come to me with this kind of almost like rebellious anti-patriarchy feeling, which again is completely innocent because it's coming from fear, essentially. And it's also kind of like that, I think you were talking about like swinging to the opposite place. It's like often, particularly my women who are kind of, we talked about this before, like phosphoric witches who tend to like burn out, they can then kind of reject and swing to the opposite and like want to do nothing and completely avoid the masculine. So I think that's really great to presence, actually, because I think you're about to speak to
Yeah.
that.
Well, like, you know, and also just for a second to honor that experience, because ancestrally, whether it's genetically or however you relate to ancestors, a very patriarchal, rule-bound model of what was right and wrong told the wise woman that she was wrong and needed to die. So any fear that people might have residually around that being part of their experience of, or for what in whatever way, is really understandable. And I would say that's shadow. That's the shadow masculine. And there's no doubt about it, but it's not all that the masculine is. So I just want to speak to the light now.
Yeah, I love that, because also for me, the way I've described that for my women is kind of that witch wound of like once we were burned at the stake, and that's no longer happening. So like we need to kind of tend our bodies and let them know that that's not going to happen now. But also it did happen, and it's like been inherited and passed down through epigenetics, and it's in our DNA. So we will fear the fear of that. So yeah, I completely agree.
So no dishonoring of that. And there's an opportunity to rethink our relationship, therefore, with the masculine. And I want to use the Queen's funeral as the perfect example.
I love
and
this.
Most people listening to this will have at least know that Queen Elizabeth II is dead and had a funeral. And probably, if they were anything like me, were glued to a television screen watching a moment in history and archetypes play out. Now, I think it's pretty well recognized that her funeral went without a hitch. And how did that go without a hitch? Order, structure, discipline, and everyone submitting to that. Clear goal. And that everyone had a place, they had to stand. You know, Harry and Meghan, they were surrendered fully to something of a higher order, of structure. There wasn't room for freedom. We didn't need our freedoms to run wild. We needed to align together in service of something very specific. Now, that's what war is, actually. And that has obviously not always something we should be disciplining ourselves to submit to. But on this occasion, what was the purpose? What was the higher order of things? It was to respect and honor a woman's death. And I consider death and a queen both archetypally feminine. And so what was the masculine energetic in service of? It's quite moving to me, actually. The death of a queen, the ultimate feminine. And it was actually her desires. They were her desires that she made very clear. She took many years to do, and her desires were met fully by the masculine energetic, and the world stood still. And every leader from everywhere in the world, apart from obvious exceptions, were there, submitted on a bus, going on buses together. Like impossible things happened in service of something that was ultimately feminine desire. And this is my seeing. This is my relatively recent state of the world seeing. When the goal of the masculine is to serve the whole, which is what the feminine envisions and sees, everything works. The system works. But soft power, which is envisioning, creating and desiring from within, through listening to soul, has to come first. It comes first.
I think a lot of people listening to that will be like, well, how? Like And also, I know for myself, I'm just going to use a personal example because I love what you're saying here and I completely agree. Like the feminine in my mind has to go first. And I would love for you to talk a little bit more to that. But in just bringing that into my own experience just the other day, because I've been hitting up against, funnily enough, this like kind of masculine, energetic, like just the other day, I went to a car park and I accidentally, innocently drove around the wrong way. And I was going like completely the wrong way, and everybody was just all the men were coming around like shaking their fists and getting really cross with me. And then I went into the shop, and when I came out, what I had got a puncture in my tire, and somebody had intentionally put a nail in my tire. And at that moment, I could see, I was like, okay, there's something here for me about me being penetrated by the masculine that is for me to see and work with. And also there was a part of me that's like, oh, the masculine, this happened. Like, I don't want to be penetrated in that way. And it was just like there's an argument between my queen and my victim who's learned that this is not good. So it was just, there's something in that for me, I think. But I think it'd be really interesting because at that point I was like, how is this the feminine leading?
Well, I can't really speak to your story right now. I don't know enough about what happened. But what I'm talking about when I'm talking about feminine desire and vision and envisioning is that which is wanting to happen. And you are the one who receives from source the possible vision of that future and then the desire for it. And it has health because it's kind of it's what I call wisdom, your soul's wisdom. So soft power is leading with heart and soul, and soul first, because soul is what I consider wisdom to be, is your own inner knowing. And it's clear and it's clean, and it doesn't have a lot of ego in it or a lot of need in it. It's just a kind of felt knowing of something's for you. And it's like intuitive. You know, another word for it is intuitive. Another word for it is instinctive. Another word for it is kind of insight or a clarity of the, like, just knowing. It's embodied. So these are all words that you could use for it. And people often ask, well, what's the difference? How do I know? How do I recognize my wisdom? And the answer is it's what it's not. is the easiest way to point to it, because it's what's absent. And what's absent is a lot of noise, a lot of analysis, a lot of examination, pros and conning, a lot of story, justification, and shoulds. So all of those, if you look, will come with a feeling of heaviness around them.
I love what you're saying here, because often my women will really, really struggle to, I guess, trust their own wisdom, but also even see it at times, because it's that kind of, what you're speaking to is like all of that stuff. And usually it's shadow stuff. Usually it's kind of some sort of fear is often in the way of that deeper access to wisdom, if that makes sense.
Well, you know, quite a simple shorthand is should. When we're shoulding on ourselves, it's got a quality. Or when we have expectations of how things should be, which is shoulding on others. But, you know, when there's a should about how the world should be, how I should be, how others should be, there's expectation in it, inevitably. And there's judgment, because you've judged something as not that. So you've got expectation and judgment and a should in there. And when you package that up, everybody feels that as a weight. So that's conditioned action or conditioned desire has within it a heaviness to it. And we're so familiar with it, we think it's normal. It's not. It's the embracing of something that the intellect has told you you should, for whatever reason, because you were brought up that way, because good people do, because whatever. Now, contrast that with what I'm going to call inspired action, when you just want to. It comes from within. You don't need to make yourself. You just find yourself doing it. I found myself today listening to a podcast about the Bushmen of Kalahari. I had time. So, and then there I was, a thought occurred in my head. Oh, I'm interested. Leanne mentioned something about her Mexican tribal people being one of the oldest. And this is another old one. And I wonder what they think. And, you know, just a kind of daydreamy thought. And then I am watching a YouTube video. And that was inspired action. I was led there. There was something in there for me. And what it turns out I was interested in particular as it relates to this conversation is the roles in those tribes are very clearly defined and along gender lines, hunters and gatherers, but the decision making is equal. They are equal in authority. And I thought that's interesting. That's alignment with how I think things should work. So there was something in there for me. But my point is that little moment of, oh, I'd like to watch that. That's inspired action. That's my wisdom. That's desire in health. Not I should watch it because somebody told me it was good and I should. No, I'm feeling that little glimmer of desire and I'm following it. It's a following we do. Wisdom is something we follow. We don't manufacture it. We don't create it. We don't do a 3-point plan or structure. It's something that arises in the moment, and it's got a lightness to it, a quality of inspiration in it. Now, when your desire comes from there, the way that the feminine is made is the feminine will always in health, in its light, energetic, healthy feminine will always take into account the interest of the whole. It's only when we go into shadow in the feminine that we become self-serving, greedy, egocentric, and selfish, which we do in the feminine energetic. But when it's in health and beauty and truth, instinctively, intuitively, the feminine serves the whole. The feminine looks for that's, you know, how women are more able to have awareness of more things going on at the same time. They have more data. So they know, because that's how the tribe works. The women are looking out for the whole. The hunter has to be very focused on just that kill, very focused and disciplined. So the way our brains work are designed beautifully for those things. So this sensitivity to the whole versus focus on the goal. But when the goal serves the whole, boom, we're winning. Everyone's winning. Everyone's winning. Now, what's happened is in business, we've only got interested in goals, achieving goals. And so this idea of the sort of connection and creativity that the energy of the feminine brings isn't seen as the earth from which everything grows. It's kind of a luxury or a nice to have rather than a prerequisite.
Yeah, as you're speaking now, I'm just thinking about the relevance of this in terms of my women who will be listening. And it feels like there's something around, often there's like that, it's often almost what stops magical women allowing themselves to be magical is because they feel like there's this sense of like having to, like, I should be in this career that's more masculine, or I should be doing this instead, as opposed to fully allowing themselves to be in their hearts and be in their feminine kind of healing gifts and the healing essence, essentially.
Well, look, I think that's because we've inherited an idea of what success really means and how to fit in. And that is probably masculine led but definitely the world of form, you know, status, money, appearance, even likes, number of likes, what you can measure. And yet not everything that you can measure matters, and not everything that matters you can measure. So we've kind of allowed ourselves to buy into a notion of what we should be doing to be successful. Now, the truth is, feminine energetic is valuable, beautiful, necessary just by its existence. What is like the Renaissance and the Raphaelite period filled with pictures of? Who, you know, it's the feminine, it's the feminine form. It's venerated, it's beautiful for its own sake. There's the beauty, love. These are incredibly lovely things that are just valid in their own sake. Intuition, the formless realms, the things that we don't, the felt realms, the things we just feel. These you can't put them in a wheelbarrow and measure them, but they are intrinsically of value and of worth. And it is my job to wake the feminine energy up to its own value in the whole, and not just in the whole, necessary to the whole.
Well, what comes to mind is that, again, one of my women's fears is often that, like, in choosing soul and feminine, they're kind of giving up abundance. And from my own experience is that the more we kind of deepen into the feminine soul, abundance is like a natural byproduct. So I just wondered whether you could speak to that a little bit, because that feels...
Okay. Well, I'm just going to have to depart a little bit from the world of form, materia, where you know things have a predictable order, and step into the world of spirit and soul, where that order is of a lesser order, and there's a higher order of things, and that is our own felt connection with soul and spirit, one spirit. And the more we start to develop the language or the knowing of that, the more we interact with, let's say, desire, and we surrender that to spirit, and then it appears in the world of form. Now, I don't claim to know how that works. I just absolutely know it works. And I've tested it many times over the years. And if we vibrate our true desires and we co-create with the energetic of the universe, they transpire, they happen for us. But they don't happen in a linear way that we can control, which is what the world of form that we live in likes to. Well, you've got to do this, and then you do that, and then that happens. And whilst that's true, in the sense, in the feminine, it doesn't work like that. You have to surrender a kind of controlling to a higher order of things, which is a kind of co-creation with the universe. And when we're in true alignment, it's inevitable, because you won't imagine for yourself things that aren't really for you. You only will. What comes to you to desire and envision is when it comes from an inspired place, not a conditioned place. Because you envisioning I should have a red Porsche because, like, that's what your dad had or something. That isn't it. But when it comes soulfully from you, from within, and you feel that sense of true desire and knowing that is what you want. I had it recently where I've done a lot less moving over the summer than normal. So I put on a nice little layer of fat that I thought, not sure I want this around. So I was like, oh, do I go back to my hardcore human being diet to sort this out, because it did, 2 years ago, I did really well on it. It was felt really fit on it, And then I didn't want to. And I didn't know why I didn't want to. It wasn't just the discipline of it. It was something else. And then I allowed myself to be in envisioning and desiring. And I saw myself in Thailand at this place, Samahita retreat, for 2 or 3 weeks. And I knew that was what I really wanted. And I allowed myself to desire it. Often what you get in the way of our own desires, we block them. And when I allowed it, and now I'm out there co-creating, and I know, I don't know when, but I know at the right moment that will be happening. I've handed it over and it will be manifested. I've spoken it out to my husband, to Leanne, to a few other, and now to you all. So it's now we're all in a co-creation of what I really want. So I can't remember what question you asked me, but I know that's what I needed to say to you. So
yeah, it was about abundance, about the kind of inevitability of abundance as we kind of allow ourselves to be in that deep desire, which is my experience as well. Yeah, I love that. There was something that you talked to earlier that sparked something, and I can't quite remember what it was you said. So it might seem like an irrelevant place to take this conversation, but it was something that you had said. And it was, I think, around how we kind of talked this actually in a message to me about like how science essentially creates the way to measure itself. We talked about the masculine creating a way to measure itself. And I just wondered if we could speak to that, because particularly I think that's another reason why, especially as witches, often my women won't trust the magic of that creation that you're just speaking to there, even actually about like abundance just naturally being created when we co-create from soul. Is that because there's not that logical linear understanding of like, okay, we do this and this happens because of this. And I think that's one of the blockers to my women fully being unapologetically magical, because they're just like, well, how does it work? and actually we're just so used to having a logical linear path.
Well, that's the materia. That's the world of form. That is which can be measured. And the assumption therein is that's all there is. Now, I have been present at birth and death, and I can absolutely tell you that is not all that there is. And it looks as simple as this to me, Nicole, is I have seen a dead body, and most people have or would know the difference between an alive body and a dead body. And the reason we know is because there's an animating life force, essence, energy that is no longer there. Whatever that is, has intelligence in it and is part of everything. Now, you can call that whatever you want, but we know it's true.
Yeah, I love that. And as a homeopath, and it kind of, with homeopathic training, I would call it life force, like you did.
Okay, well, let's call it life force. The Tao that can be spoken is not the Tao. It's not in the word of it. It's not in the words. It's in the essence of it, with the ineffable, knowable essence of the life force itself. The only leap you have to make is that it has intelligence in it. And if you've ever looked at a flower or witnessed a birth, or even just watched a tree, a weed navigate concrete, you will see that there's intelligence in that life force essence. And then if you look at ecosystems and how they work, you can see the intelligence, you can see the output of the intelligence. So it's not a massive leap to see that there's this life force, this energetic that has intelligence in it, and it's universal. And it's before the form, it gives birth to the form. It is all, it is everything, the allness and the isness. And if you can get a glimpse of that, you can start to see that in that place, all that is the ineffable, all things can be in that world. It's a world our little brains, this little tiny organ called our brain, cannot comprehend. And yet we can know it. We can sense it. And what it's all that is being asked is to submit to that universal mind, you could even call it, that has intelligence, and to be in co-creation with that, and to find your own relationship with that.
I just wonder if you can speak to the co-creation a little bit more, because some of my listeners might not be familiar with necessarily with, and I used a 3 principles kind of phrase for that there. Is there some other way that you can kind of explain that, maybe?
What with co-creation?
Yeah, the co-creation, because the way I would probably describe it is like a co-creation between the spirit and the soul, which feels very almost like that masculine and feminine. Yeah.
Yes, that is what it's like. So I would say that a clear mind and an open heart are receptive to something. And what arises in an open heart and a clear mind in you is your soul's wisdom. So that's the channel. You turn to channel soul wisdom, which receives spirit, whatever you want to call that, life force, whatever it is. It doesn't really matter what you call it. But whatever that energetic is, that is all the everything and has intelligence in it, is received on your personal soul wisdom channel when you have an open heart and a quiet mind. So whatever you're receiving on that channel, that's definitely for you.
I love that. That's gorgeous. I know just before we spoke, actually, just before we pressed record, you were talking about this model that you've come up with around the different feminine and masculine kind of traits and their shadows. And I'd love for you to share a little bit more on that, because that feels really powerful.
Yeah. So I've got I'll send you a little sort of snapshot of this. This is my original thinking. I've called it in the business setting the game changer model, because I am speaking about business, and business is the game. But it's beyond that. It's the game of life, really. And it is about both. It's about the and the active, the head power we've talked about, focused on achieving the goal. Purposeful, providing, achieving. That is the traditional masculine energetic, and that is recognized as a natural clarity, which is logical, present, and stable. So there's a kind of strength in it, stability, strength, presence, and logic. And then it comes with it in its health, a natural confidence. Let's do it. Let's focus. Let's make it happen. Let's make it so. And a directness. So there's a direct path. It's about progress, and it's determined, resolute, heroic even. So that I characterize those as clarity and confidence as the 2 attributes of head power, focused on achieving the goal. And then we need to have the balancing energetics. So I've got, that would be at the top, and then underneath that I have attributed the feminine energetic, receptive heart power that serves the whole, which speaks to some of the things we've been talking about. So you've got, as opposed to focusing on the goal, we're looking wide and we're serving the whole. And for that, you need the qualities of connection, which is all about feeling open and inclusive. It's all about human empathy, all the listening. And then you've got creativity, which we've talked to, which is the intuitive, desiring, envisioning. So all of this is about embodied, envisioning, magnetic, drawing to you, receiving. So these are words I use. So you've got clarity and confidence, achieve the goal for you could say the masculine or head power, and you've got connection, creativity, serving the whole, heart power. And that's in its health. But all of it is led by soul power, which is aligning with your core wisdom, which is almost neutral in a sense. It's beyond masculine, feminine. It's just your alignment. Everybody is got their own soul that aligns with the spirit. So so soul power. So achieve the goal, serve the whole by following soul. It's my little thing.
I love that.
But shall I tell you now about what that all looks like in shadow?
Yes, please do.
Okay. So I spent a lot of time analyzing and reading and feeling into all the things around this. So some of it you might already know and some of it might be fresh to you. But here is the shadow energetic of the masculine. Achieve the goal at any cost. Demanding, controlling, and dominating is in shadow. So clarity turns hypercritical, paranoid, cold, and stuck. Self-righteous becomes insensitive, impatient, and aggressive, the opposite of confidence. So that is where we go when we're in shadow on the masculine energetic. The feminine energetic, connection, love, serving, sacrifice, turns to martyrdom, where we blame, we're codependent, and we overplease. We sacrifice our own needs at the cost of whatever we need to do to please others. And then creativity in its perfection turns into being ungrounded, manipulative, unaccountable, and greedy. And then our real kind of magnetism and ability to attract and draw in becomes repressed, deluded, and lazy.
Occurs to me, I really love that. What occurred to me is I was before I asked that question, I was also feeling like, how does a call to soft power show up for magical women? And essentially, as you were talking there, I was like, oh, it shows up by the expression of shadow, probably.
Right.
Like my women, for example, would be feeling that like real denial of their needs and like seeking of approval, and that also that ungroundedness of like not being in their body. So obviously the way that kind of shows up is the shadow expressions often are like a deeper calling into soft power, I guess.
Absolutely. And the headline, if the feminine serves the whole, in shadow, it loses self to avoid pain. So you lose yourself in the whole to avoid pain. And there is no you anymore. You're just a serving of other people, or you're avoiding pain by numbing or whatever you're doing to lose that connection with the whole. So that's the shadow lead. And then at the center, if we've got wisdom leading, well, when we're in alignment with soul power, when we're in shadow, we have our victim leading. And that is how to know straight away whether you're in shadow or light, is wisdom and victim have two very distinct feelings.
Ooh, yeah.
And a victim will feel insecure. The energy of victim is insecurity. That's the fundamental reactive insecure. Now, sometimes it will look like rescuing. Sometimes it will look like you're aggressing, but ultimately they're all victim positions. And that's the signal to oneself that oneself is in shadow, when you feel a victim of.
I love that. What I particularly love is that often my women will not think that they're powerful, and yet they're these symptoms of, like, as you say, being in like that need for approval. They're denying their needs, their ungroundedness, and like essentially what we're calling victim, which I again just want to speak to. Like, there's an innocence in this. Like, these are the patterns that we've learned innocently through our lives to kind of occupy, rather than that healthy expression. I've forgotten where I was going with that, but it's essentially like that. Yeah, those are actually signs that we actually do have power. It's just power perhaps in a different way to how we've been used to experiencing power in the world, if that makes sense.
Right. Well, because power, we've got an idea of what power is, and we don't recognize that the feminine is powerful, but it's a different energetic. It's got a different way of being powerful.
I love
and
that.
if you don't value it, you won't see it. Yeah, I mean, I don't think anybody wants to be a victim, but I think it's up to us each to know ourselves what we do when we feel like we are. Like, I think it's incumbent upon us to read, oh yeah, I get really shouty, which doesn't really look like being a victim. I don't think I'm a victim then, but because I'm obviously surrounded by fools. but I become the perpetrator in that story without realizing that really ultimately I'm just scared. But so victim can look a lot, first of all, lots of different ways, and second of all, it is completely innocent in the sense that it's just fear, and we're just doing what we know to do when we're afraid. But really, I use it as barometer of, oh, there, yeah, it's me. It's not them, even though it looks like it's them. You know, it's and useful, it's I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a sign that essentially we are powerful in a roundabout, really funny way. Like there's a feminine power in that hidden, that we can alchemize if we choose to, by firstly loving ourselves in that place of being victim.
Yeah, well, that's the key, to be able to meet yourself wherever you are in whatever experience you have, and love is always the alchemist.
Yeah, I love that so much, and very feminine, of course. Yeah, beautiful. Let me just see if there's anything else that I wanted to explore with you. Because we talked a little bit about phosphorus, and phosphorus is very much as you described there, actually kind of heart wide open, got that fiery kind of personality as well, which can show up in shadow at times, and again, kind of not really seeing that is that deeper power from our women. But I think one of the things that I wanted to ask you about was, because like we have kind of intellectually explored that, but how can women at home begin to get a feel for soft power in their bodies, if that makes sense? How can we kind of begin to, if we're in that kind of shadowy expression of it, how can we begin to embody the soft power, the healthy expression of soft power?
I think the very first thing to pay attention to, that I think everybody can find their own reference for, is your heart open? Is it closed? And I think we all, if I was to ask anybody that at any moment in time of any situation, I think they could tell you, is it open or is it closed? And when it's open, you can trust whatever comes to you. And when it's closed, open it. You know, and mostly what we're opening to is ourselves, is allowing aspects of ourselves that we've judged or rejected or not wanted or resisted or not want to feel or whatever it is. That's what closes us off. And if you can stay open, or look at what would it take to me to be open, or would I be willing to be open, even just the question, that's going to give you the option. And the heart, if invited, will always open. So is your heart open to whatever it is? Open, and then open to what you receive when your heart is open. And it will be your wisdom guiding you. It can't not be. And it's that simple about anything. You know, are you constricting? Are you closing off? Or are you opening? And that opening act of opening can be as simple as, if you're tired, have a bath, you know, or whatever.
I love that.
It can involve an action as well, or not, you know, but it's just do what makes sense to have your heart be open again, and then trust whatever comes. It really is that simple. That is it right there, soft power.
That's so gorgeous. I'm glad you said that last bit about trust, because I was thinking about asking about that. Like, again, one of the things that my phosphoric women will struggle with is that sense of trust. And yeah, it really is almost like a deeper choice to just allow ourselves to trust the feminine, it feels to me.
I want to just say one more thing, because I think phosphorus is quite extroverted as a profile, and I'm extroverted, and I think you are too. And I think there's something about orienting ourselves to other people to define who we are, which is the energetic of extroversion. And it's perfect and beautiful and wonderful. And it makes us amazing at reading people and adapting and all the things. But if we lose ourselves and in the other view of us, we can lose sight of our own knowing, because we're so busy listening to everyone else's knowing, what somebody wrote in a book, what this podcast is saying, what you're saying, what I'm saying, what Leanne's saying. And these are all valuable pointers, but nothing replaces the thing that resonates with what you know. That's where the external meets that on the inside, that's certainty. When something external triggers some inner knowing, that's for you. That's so simple. But don't rely on the external. You can take it or leave it. You can live your whole life without ever having input from anyone else and still follow your own wisdom. That's always the true north. But you can go and phone a friend and ask 10 people, but you'll notice that what resonates in you is for you. And not because they said it, but because you heard it.
I love that. Beautiful. Yeah. Thank you so much. That feels a good place to complete, unless there's anything else that you want to share that feels like we haven't yet explored.
No, I do have a poem though about all this, which I wouldn't mind reading.
I would love to hear that.
I don't know if we've got time for it, but
absolutely, please.
Let me just find it, because I write a lot of poetry.
Yes, I love your poems.
Oh, thank you. It's called A Woman's Worth. I wrote it on International Women's Day, and I was actually, when I wrote this, or actually I channeled it, I can't really say I wrote it, it just came to me in this clarity. And I was sitting at the hairdresser in Spain, where I always used to get my hair done, and Jerry and Donna, and they're two women. And I've got two sons and a husband, so I was often surrounded by masculine energetic, and this hairdresser was this feminine sanctuary. And I would go and they'd say, "Hi, darling, would you like some champagne?" And I just suddenly feel my feminine arise. And it happened to be International Women's Day. And then I was feeling the gratitude for these women. And then suddenly this poem came, and I had to write it down quickly whilst I had my hair dyeing. So this is called A Woman's Worth. Luscious, gorgeous, sensual skin, inner guidance from within, ancient wisdom from the past. Our sisters whisper in our hearts and speak the truth into our ears. Live your truth and not your fears. You are rich and blessed and wise. You have power. Don't disguise your glory in some petty way. Shine out, shine bright, and show the way. We are women, strong and free, and it's enough to just be me. We have the power. This is truth, not just the maiden of our youth. At every age, we offer more. Mother, crone, and even whore. Let us reclaim our glorious ways and live our essence all our days, and show the earth that we can care, that love is bold. And who else dares to see beyond the force of man a kinder, more connected plan, where we make space for all to be, where all belong, humanity, where truth and tribe and love can rule, and separation is the fool, where we can hold and heal the earth, for that is a real woman's worth.
Oh my goodness, that's but all the tingles from that. That's magical and very phosphoric. Like I love it. I love that. Beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. That is just, your words are such a gift.
Thank you.
And
Been
your
a pleasure.
wisdom. Thank you, Elizabeth. Is there 'cause I'm going to put in the show notes as well. But is there anywhere that people can find you, follow you? Is there anything that you're particularly working on that you'd like to share before we complete?
I'm working on programs for women leaders. I think I'm going to call it something like Heart, the Power of the Feminine. And it will be small groups traveling together who are very sisters, supporting it. They're all out there in the world being powerful, and then they come together as a small group of sisters. So I'm cooking that up. So if you're interested and you want to hear more about that, just join my mailing list on my name, www.elizabethlovius.com. and you can find out more. That's pretty much where you can find me. I'm not into newsletters at the moment, but I will be once I start getting really clear about what this offer is. But it's very much, I want to empower women to value their own soft power. So if you want to stay in that conversation with me, just sign up and I'll let you know what's happening next.
That was a brilliant episode with Elizabeth Lovius. Here are my takeaways. We can learn a lot from the power of archetypes or remedy personalities which activate truth in us that wants to be heard. For example, Elizabeth's discovery of herself as the natural romantic instead of the masculine led her to her deeper purpose and wisdom to wake people up to the value of soft power, which women especially lead from. The masculine is, in essence, like New York City. Its energy is big, thrusting things that point up. And the feminine energetic is more like the earth. It holds the thing that's thrusting, the things that aren't visible, yet everything is birthed within. Goals are only part of the story of creation. The feminine is interested in the deeper, heart-led purpose of what nourishes the earth and serves the whole. And there can be a deep resistance and rebellion to the masculine often. We must honour that because ancestrally, that witch wound fear of the shadow masculine is inbuilt into ourselves. But we're actually here to create union. There's a real opportunity here to rethink our relationship with the masculine. The masculine is ultimately here to honour the feminine's soul desires. And this was evident in the Queen's funeral, which went without a hitch due to order and structure and everyone submitting to that. As the goal was really ultimately in deep service to the death of a queen, the ultimate feminine. It was actually her desires that were being provided for fully by the masculine. We are only used to the masculine expression of power, which can make us forget that the feminine holds power too. It's just that often power shows up in shadow. Masculine and feminine energetics each have gifts. The masculines are clarity and confidence, and the feminines are connecting and creating. And they each have their own shadow expressions too, all of which are showing us where we can heal and become the healthy, sovereign expression of our feminine soft power. If you'd like to get the show notes and links for everything we've chatted about in this episode, head to www.secretwitch.co.uk. If you know a secret witch who would love this episode, please share with them to help them liberate themselves. And so you don't miss out on next week's episode, head to your podcast app of choice and hit subscribe. Thank you so much for listening. I'll see you next time.